This is a long-term gain because what we want to do is get such massive oil reserves in Iran out of the hands of terrorists. And so what we're going to experience here in the short term is highly outweighed of the long-term benefit, because ultimately we're not going to have to worry about these issues in the Strait of Hormuz, because we're going to get all of the oil out of the hands of terrorists.
America is now sending a message so extreme, so reckless, and so revealing that it changes the entire way people are looking at this war with Iran. Because once reports start circulating that a US official said America would seize all of Iran's oil, this stops sounding like a limited military confrontation and starts sounding like something much bigger, something uglier, something a lot closer to economic conquest dressed up as national security. And even where that exact wording is not firmly confirmed in primary source reporting, the broader direction is impossible to miss. Trump has already demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. Reuters also reported that he said the United States should play a role in choosing Iran's next leader. At that point, people are no longer just hearing war rhetoric, they are hearing domination rhetoric. They are hearing a vision of total control. Because think about what seize the oil actually means. Iran is not just another country in a regional conflict. Iran sits next to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important energy choke points on the planet. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes through that corridor. So when the war starts colliding with oil, this is not some side issue. This is the center of the global economy. Reuters reported that Iran's Revolutionary Guards openly challenged Trump's idea of US Navy escorts for tankers in the strait. In other words, this is already moving beyond missiles and airstrikes into a direct struggle over energy routes and control of supply. And that is where this gets dangerous fast. Because once the world starts believing America is not just fighting Iran, but trying to control Iran's energy future, the whole conflict looks different. It no longer looks like a narrowly defined attempt to contain a threat. It starts looking like a war with economic motives attached to it. It starts looking like power projection tied directly to oil leverage. And whether Washington uses those exact words or not, that is the interpretation a lot of people will take from the combination of military escalation, tanker policy, oil sanctions, and regime change style rhetoric. Now add in what the US government is already doing financially. Just hours ago, the US Justice Department announced civil forfeiture complaints against $15 million allegedly linked to an Iranian oil shipping network. That came on top of earlier sanctions reported by Reuters against entities and vessels involved in Iranian petroleum trade. So, this is not some abstract theory anymore. The United States is already moving aggressively against Iranian oil linked money, oil shipping networks, and sanctioned vessels. That does not prove the phrase seize all Iran's oil was officially declared in those exact words. But it absolutely shows the United States is already operating in a framework of intercepting, freezing, and disrupting Iran's oil economy. And then it gets even more serious. Reuters reported last month that US forces seized a sanctioned oil tanker in the Indian Ocean after tracking it from the Caribbean. So when people hear claims that America wants to seize Iran's oil, they are not hearing something completely disconnected from reality. They are hearing an escalated version of a policy direction that is already visible. Oil tankers are being tracked, networks are being sanctioned, funds are being targeted, and military protection of shipping lanes is being discussed in the middle of an expanding war. But here is the bigger problem for Washington. Oil wars have consequences far beyond the battlefield. The New York Post, citing market data and officials, reported US oil surged above $90 as the conflict intensified and Trump demanded Iran surrender.
Well, look, this economy feels very good to me as well. I agree with you. But what about the price of oil, Mohammed? Oil prices, of course, have been surging in the middle of this war in Iran. Prices not seen since July 2024. And then you've got this dramatic prediction from the Qatari energy minister this morning. He's telling the Financial Times, and everybody's writing about it, that all Gulf energy exporters could shut down within weeks and drive oil prices to $150 a barrel. Oil right now at 85.80. Tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, of course, have slowed significantly after these attacks, because the insurance companies don't want to insure. I mean, no, the U.S. did not shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and no, Israel and Iran did not shut down the Strait. But the insurance companies don't want to insure, and so the ships and the tankers are afraid to pass through. Gasoline prices jumping. Brent is up 25% since February 27th, Mohammed. Crude oil's up 28.4% since the end of February, the day before this war in Iran started. What's your take on the impact here?
All these are the unintended consequences of the war. So higher oil prices is also pushing interest rates higher. So affordability is going to come under pressure. Supply chains are being disrupted. Now, the hope, Maria, is that all this is temporary. That is the mindset of the market right now. Yes, it is a shock in the short term, but we will pass it. What the Qatari official was trying to tell the world is be careful. There are what's called multiple equilibria. The further away you go from your initial conditions, the more likely you are to go even further away. That's what he's warning against. And that has to do with the dynamics of inventory. They have to stop production at some point. So we are at a very delicate point for the economy. And a lot will depend on the duration and spread of this war.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, Mohammed, I know that you're going to be part of our all hands on deck when these numbers come out. Stay right there. We're going to slip in a break, and then we've got the breaking data on the other side of this break. Stay with us, everybody.
Qatar's energy minister warned oil could spike even higher if the disruption deepens. And once oil spikes, everything starts moving with it. Gasoline, shipping, inflation, consumer anxiety, market fear. So even if the White House thinks this is pressure on Tehran, ordinary people hear something much simpler. Another war that makes life more expensive. And this is why the seize the oil narrative is so explosive. Because to the public, it sounds like the oldest story in the book. Governments say the war is about security, but somehow oil is always right there in the middle of the picture. And once that suspicion takes hold, it becomes incredibly hard to control politically. People start asking whether this is really about defense or whether defense is being used as the language to justify a much bigger strategic and economic project in the region. That question becomes even more powerful when Trump's own rhetoric keeps escalating. Reuters reported that he said there would be no deal except unconditional surrender, and that he wanted a say in Iran's future leadership. That is not the language of de-escalation. That is not the language of limited objectives. That is the language of a power imagining what comes after collapse. And once you're imagining what comes after collapse, people start asking who benefits from the wreckage. Now, to be careful and fair, there is a difference between an exact code being fully confirmed and a policy trajectory being obvious. Right now, I have not found a strong primary source report confirming that a named US official publicly said, word for word, we will seize all of Iran's oil. What is confirmed is the wider pattern. Trump's surrender demand, talk of shaping Iran's next leadership, US legal action against Iran-linked oil funds, sanctions on Iranian petroleum networks, prior tanker seizures, and active concern over oil routes through Hormuz. So the safest way to frame this is not that Washington has officially announced some formal doctrine called seize all Iran's oil. The safest way to say it is that the war is increasingly colliding with oil power. And many people now see the conflict as moving in that direction. But politically, perception matters almost as much as policy. If America is seen as trying to dominate Iran's oil position, then every strike, every sanction, every tanker move, every threat in Hormuz will be interpreted through that lens. Allies get nervous, markets panic, rivals harden, and Tehran gets handed a simple propaganda line that can resonate across the region. This war was never just about security, it was about control. And once that narrative wins, the strategic cost skyrockets. Because then, America is not just fighting Iran, it is fighting distrust from energy markets, suspicion from foreign governments, and anger from people who think they've seen this movie before. A war sold one way, an oil struggle unfolding underneath it, and a population back home left paying more while being told this is all necessary. That is why this statement, or even the belief that this is what officials are thinking, matters so much. Because seize the oil is not a minor phrase. It is the kind of phrase that reveals the whole fear hiding underneath this conflict. That the war may not stay limited, that its goals may be expanding, that energy dominance may be part of the real story, and that once oil becomes central, the line between military strategy and economic extraction starts looking very thin. So the real issue now is not just whether one official used one exact sentence. The real issue is whether US actions are already creating that exact impression. And right now, with surrender demands, tanker pressure, seized funds, sanctioned oil networks, and military confrontation around one of the world's most vital energy choke points, that impression is only getting stronger.